Good day, and welcome back to our Bible study of the book of Daniel. This is lesson 13, and we're in chapter 8. We're going to do verses 1 to 8 and verses 15 to 22. Now, these are the visions of Daniel. They are somewhat hard to interpret unless you understand to some degree the history and the feelings of the peoples of the times in which they were written. Daniel wrote this, as he says in the first part of this chapter 8, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me. So this now is back in time, because Daniel had gone through the reigns of Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, and Persia was taken over by Babylon was taken over by the Mede Persians, and he was also a confidant and an advisor to the kings of Persia. So this is going back in time when he was still under King Belshazzar. And it says in the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, which would make it about 550 BC. It said, a vision appeared to me after the one that appeared to me the first time. This was the second. He had a vision in the 1st year of the reign of King Belshazzar. This is in the 3rd year. And he says, I saw in the vision, and it so happened while I was looking that I was in Shushan, the citadel, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. So he was having this vision where he was in the town, in the city of Shushan. Now Shushan was a city quite a piece from the city of Babylon, on the edge of the Babylonian Empire. However, it for a time became the capital of the Persian Empire. And if you go back to the book of Esther, in the 1st chapter of Esther, you see this is Shushan where Esther and the king lived. And it was also from Shushan that the prophet Nehemiah made his journey, or started his journey to go back to Jerusalem. So Shushan is important throughout parts of the Bible, the Old Testament. Here it is that Daniel's having this vision of being in Shushan. And while he was looking, while he was in Shushan and in the province of Elam, I saw in the vision that I was by the river Ulai. Then I lifted my eyes and saw, and there standing beside the river was a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no animal could withstand him, nor was there any that could deliver from his hand, but he did according to his will, and became great. Now, when this vision came to Daniel, he was in the Empire of Babylon. And this was before the Medes Persian Empire took over. So this is actually a vision of the Medes and Persians. And it says he saw a ram with 2 horns, one higher than the other. The idea of this is the fact that the Medes and Persians were of 2 different countries, shall we say. The Medes were the lesser of the 2. The Persians came in later and sort of overtook the Medes, and they became united as the Medes and Persia. And this is where there were 2 horns, one greater than the other. The ram was actually one of the symbols of the Persian Empire. And it was said that one of the kings of Persia, a name of Amanias Massilinus, he led his army into battle while holding the head of a ram. And the ram was also pictured on monuments and on the coinage of Persia. So this was a symbol of Persia. The ram was a symbol of the Mede-Persian Empire. And what it did when the Medes and Persians conquered, they conquered northward, the Scythians, they conquered westward toward the Greeks, and southward towards Egypt. And this is what this ram in the vision was doing. It had 2 horns. One was high, one was higher than the other. So the Medes was not quite an equal in this relationship with the Persians. The Persians were greater. The higher one came up later because the Persians joined the Medes after the Medes started their campaigns. And the ram pushed westward towards Greece, northwards toward the Scythians, and southward towards Egypt. And no, the Medes and Persians overtook the lands that they went after. They were very victorious in battle. So the Mede-Persian Empire became quite extensive. And this ram is a vision of the Medes and Persians, how they dominated and spread their empire westward, northward, and southward. So this was a vision which occurred before the Medes and the Persians overtook the Babylonians. But further he went on to say, and then as I was considering, certainly a male goat came from the west across the surface of the whole earth without touching the ground, and the great goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Then he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing beside the river, and ran at him with furious power. And I saw him confronting the ram. He was moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke his two horns. There was no power in the ram to withstand him. But he cast him down to the ground and trampled him, and there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. Now this idea of using animals as an idea of mankind is not unusual. We often talk about using animals as a way of expressing what we think or what we feel. You know, you're as strong as an ox and mad as a bull. There's a whole bunch of different ways in which we use animals as a means of expression. And this is really what this vision is doing, is using these animals as a means of expression. So Daniel had this vision of the Medes and Persians represented by the ram. And now he says this goat came. Now, it's interesting that the Medes and Persians conquered the Babylonians not too long after Daniel had the vision. But it was many years after that that another empire came along. And this goat represents the Greeks. And it was around 200 years after the vision that this event occurred. And yet it was almost exactly as the vision implied. He said, suddenly a male goat came from the west. Now, the Greeks came from the west of the Mede-Persian Empire. And it's interesting that the goats was a symbol of the Greeks. In fact, the Greeks are sometimes called goat people. And this came because there was apparently a time when the Greeks were called the goat people because they were directed by an oracle in the beginning who told them to have a goat lead them to where they would build a city. And this apparently happened, so they became known as the goat people. And the word for goat in their language was Aegeus. And you can see this is reflected in the Aegean Sea, which surrounds Greece. So Greece became known as the goat people. And this goat represents Greece. He said it came from the west across the surface of the earth without touching the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. The horn is a symbol of power. And if you go back into history, this was evidence of Alexander the Great. Now this was 200 years after the vision, so the people at the time of the vision would have no idea that this was coming. But now in retrospect we can see how this very well fits into the Alexander the Great's domain. He came across from the west from Greece so fast, he conquered land so fast that it said, this vision said he hardly touched the ground, without touching the ground. And he had a horn between his eyes. Then he came to the ram that had two horns, which I saw standing beside the river, and ran at him with furious power, and I saw him confronting the ram. If you go back into the history, you'll see that the Greeks confronted the Persians on a number of occasions, and with a much smaller army, defeated the Persians on 2 or 3 different times, and finally, in one large battle, defeated them and the king for good. And this was only over a period of a few years. So the ram, or the goat, came against the ram with furious power. He confronted the ram. The Greeks confronted the Mede-Persians. He was moved with rage against him, attacked the ram, and broke his 2 horns. He broke both sides of the Mede-Persian Empire. There was no power in the ram to withstand him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled him. And there was no one that could deliver the ram from his hand. The Medes and Persian Empire was helpless against the armies of Alexander the Great. And it says, therefore, the male goat grew very great, but when he became strong, the large horn was broken. And in place of it, 4 notable ones came up towards the 4 winds of heaven. And this was again significant for Alexander the Great, because he conquered almost all of the known world. And he did this before the age of 33. And it is said that when he did this, he came back to his empire with Babylon, I think it was. He took over the palace of King Nebuchadnezzar. He came back and actually wept because he had no more lands to conquer. But he died at the age of 33 as a means of a drunken party, and it is said he may have been poisoned at that party. So when he died, when this horn of the goat was broken, his empire ended up being divided among 4 of his generals, and none of them became very much equal to what the empire had been under Alexander the Great. So when he became strong, when he conquered everything he could conquer, the large horn was broken, and in place of it, 4 unnotable ones came up towards the 4 winds of heaven. So this was the vision that Daniel had about the Medes and the Persians, and then them being defeated by the Greeks. And this happened 200, 300 years before the Greek Empire developed and Alexander the Great was even born. But it fits exactly into the realm of what Alexander the Great did. And then it said, going back down to verse 15, then it happened when I, Daniel, had seen the vision and was seeking the meaning, that suddenly there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. Now, one like the Son of Man, one having the appearance of a man. It's hard to know exactly what this really refers to. If this refers to an angel or is a pre-Christian manifestation of Christ. Appeared to him appearance of a man, and I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Eli called and said, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, Son of Man, that the vision refers to the time of the end. So there's some debate as to what this time of the end really means, because a lot of the vision was fulfilled before the time of Christ, or around the time of Christ. But there still says that this understand refers to the time of the end, so this may still refer to times which are yet to come. As he was speaking to me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground, but he touched me and stood me upright and said, look, I am making known to you what shall happen at the latter time of the indignation, for at the appointed time the end shall be. The ram which you saw having the 2 horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. And the male goat is the kingdom of Greece. The large horn that is between its eyes is the first king. And as for the broken horn and the 4 that stood up to his place, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of that nation, but not with its power. This is exactly what happened after Alexander the Great died, and his kingdom was split into 4 parts, each commanded by one of his former generals. This was the vision that Daniel had, at least part of the vision. The rest of it we'll do next week. But what he's saying is that he had this vision of Mede-Persia, Persia conquering the world, conquering eastward, or conquering westward, northward, and southward, and then this kingdom was overtaken by a kingdom from the west, the Greeks, who conquered the Medes and Persians, and it was by Alexander the Great that this occurred. Alexander the Great was one of the greatest military leaders of all time, so one of the greatest kings of Greece. And he died when he was 33. And there is a poem which was written and by, I'll get this name here for a second, by Charles Ross Weed, and it quoted in the speaker's quote book, and it compares Alexander, the history of Alexander, to Christ. And I want to read this to you. It says, Jesus and Alexander died at 33. One lived and died for self. One died for you and me. The Greek died on a throne. The Jew died on a cross. One's life a triumph seemed, the other but a loss. One led vast armies forth, the other walked alone. One shed a whole world's blood, the other gave his own. One won the world in life and lost it all in death. The other lost his life to win the whole world's faith. Jesus and Alexander died at 33. One died in Babylon, one in Calvary. One gained all for self, one himself he gave. One conquered every throne, the other every grave. The one made himself God, the God made himself less. The one lived but to blast, the other but to bless. When died the Greek, forever fell his throne of swords, but Jesus died to live forever, Lord of lords. Jesus and Alexander died at 33. The Greek made all men slaves, the Jew made all men free. One built a throne on blood, the other built on love. The one was born of earth, the other from above. One won all this earth to love all earth and heaven. The other gave up all, that all to him be given. The Greek forever died, the Jew forever lives. He loves all who gets and wins all things, who gives. It compares Alexander the Great to Jesus, and you can see the comparison. Alexander the Great is the vision that was had by Daniel around 550 BC. Alexander lived around 250 BC. So, probably around 350 BC. So this was the vision, part of the vision that Daniel had. This is the vision that's related in the first part and the mid part of chapter 8. So we'll get on to the rest of the vision next week in the last part of chapter 8 and in the part of chapter 8 that we skipped today. So I hope you'll join me for that. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next week. Bye for now.